Now let us look at the cross section of the spinal cord. So I have made a big diagram, big representation of the cross section of spinal cord, and this is how it looks like. One of the major differences that you can see in the spinal cord with respect to the brain is that in brain the grey matter is outside and white matter is inside. If you open the skull, you will see the grey matter of the brain. If you cut it and look it more inside, you will see white colored substance, that is white matter. It is absolutely reverse in the case of spinal cord. That is why I say grey matter is inside. See this green color line, it is actually delineating, it is actually marking the borders of the grey matter of the spinal cord, while white matter is outside. So that is how it is exactly opposite of what is present inside the brain. So grey matter is inside, white matter is outside in case of spinal cord, while it is just the opposite in case of brain. Now, if you just look at this particular structure of the spinal cord, I see that what I see is that there is a central opening over here. So this is the central canal. So inside the spinal cord also you have a very small canal inside through which there is CSF present. How will I link this to the brain? So CSF is flowing through this particular central canal of the spinal cord. Now the way to link this is actually, you know that there are ventricles inside the brain in which there is that fluid. So how many ventricles are there in human brain? There are 4 ventricles. There are 2 lateral ventricles on this side, then you have a 3rd ventricle, then you have a 4th ventricle, and it is this 4th ventricle which is present inside the medulla oblongata, and that is going to continue as the central canal of spinal cord. So whatever is the fluid present over there, the same will be coming inside the central canal of the spinal cord, because it is just a continuation of medulla oblongata. So that particular 4th ventricle will also continue, but that will be within this particular spinal cord, and it will be continuing as the central canal of spinal cord in which there is CSF. Right? So grey matter is inside, white matter is outside, and you have a central canal in which CSF is present. Now let us dig deeper into this. Right? So if you just talk about the grey matter over here, this structure looks like a horn. So we call this particular structure as the dorsal horn of spinal cord. See, this is the dorsal horn of spinal cord. It looks like a horn, right? That is why it is called as the dorsal horn of spinal cord. Now you see that this also looks like a horn, and this is called as the ventral horn of spinal cord, right? So this is the dorsal horn of spinal cord, this is the ventral horn of spinal cord, and this is the lateral horn of spinal cord. See, it is in between both these things towards the side of the body. That is why it is called as the lateral horn of spinal cord. Right? So you have a dorsal horn, in middle you have a lateral horn, and you have a ventral horn as such, right? So that is how we actually mark the structures of the grey matter of the spinal cord. Now the problem that I used to face is that this dorsal, actually the word, another word that you can use in place of dorsal is the posterior horn. See, the word posterior and dorsal are utilized for the purpose of mentioning the same, one and only the same thing, and in place of ventral you will be writing the word anterior, right? So the dorsal horn or posterior horn will be towards my back, and ventral horn is towards my front, the front that is facing you. So that is how the whole thing is arranged in the body. So dorsal, whenever they mention the dorsal in terms of spinal cord, they will say dorsal horn is equal to posterior horn, and ventral horn is anterior horn, and lateral horn is towards the side. So it does not have any significance in saying it as dorsal or ventral. There is no other name for the lateral horn. Now just outside the spinal cord you can see this particular bulging over here, right? So this is the nerve which is coming inside the spinal cord. We say the spinal nerves are present, isn't it? So this spinal nerve, at the beginning you have a dorsal root ganglion, right? It is a collection of cell body inside the central nervous system, so you call it as a ganglion. And what will you call the collection in outside the brain? That is called as ganglion, and inside the brain it is called as nucleus. So this dorsal root ganglion, so this dorsal root ganglion is present just outside the spinal cord. So it is a collection of cell body, right? the cyton of the neuron. You know that a neuron has an axon, cyton, you have dendrite. That cell body of neurons will be present over the dorsal root ganglion. So let's dig somewhat more deeper into this and understand the functions of dorsal root, lateral root and ventral root. That will help us solve a question that was asked in 2015 exam. Let's dig deeper into the structure of spinal cord as such. So we say that dorsal root ganglion is a collection of cell bodies. Let us say that you are having a receptor on the surface of the skin. You have a skin receptor here. So this is a receptor, and a stimulus is supplied to this particular receptor, right. So once you have a stimulus to the receptor, then this particular idea, that particular sensation has to be taken into the brain. So how is that possible? There is a nerve which is connected to the receptor, and this nerve will be going through the dorsal root ganglion into the dorsal horn of spinal cord. The stimulus is applied on the receptor. The nerve is passing from the receptor through the dorsal root ganglion into the dorsal horn of spinal cord, right. So dorsal horn is responsible for collecting all the sensations from the body. The dorsal horn is responsible for collecting all the sensation of the from the body, from the skin receptors and all the other receptors, right. So it collects the touch, it collects the pressure, it collects the deep pain, superficial pain, whatever sensory modalities are present over there, everything is collected by the nerve which passes through the dorsal root ganglion into the dorsal horn, right. Now what is this dorsal root ganglion? We are talking about a nerve which is linking the receptor, which is collecting all the information from the receptor into the spinal cord, and this impulse is taken from the receptor by the nerve into the dorsal horn of spinal cord. This is the axon of the nerve. So where is the cell body of the nerve that I am talking about located? Where is the cell body of the nerve that is connecting the receptor to the dorsal horn located? Actually those are located inside the dorsal root ganglion. This is how we represent the cell body of the neuron, right. So dorsal root ganglion contains the cell body of the nerve which is joining the receptor into the spinal cord, into the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, where all the sensations are received. So the dorsal horn, the function of the dorsal horn is the sensory function, right. It receives the sensations and then it goes upwards to where? To the neuron, I mean the brain. It goes upwards into the brain, right. From the dorsal horn it goes upwards like this into the brain, and the brain will process the information, right. So that is the function of the dorsal horn. So don't ever forget this, dorsal horn is the sensory horn of the neuron, right. Now there is one more question that they continuously keep on asking: dorsal horn, dorsal root ganglion or the posterior root ganglion, what type of nerve is it? What type of nerve is present inside this? Those nerves are the pseudo unipolar neurons, right. These are the type of neuron they will keep on continuously asking in the Neet level exam, preparation exams. The point is there are three types of nerves in human body. One is actually unipolar neurons that was present in embryonic stage. Then you have bipolar neurons. When we discuss the topic of eye, in the retina we have ganglion cell, bipolar cell and photoreceptor cell. This bipolar cell is the bipolar neuron, right. And then there are multipolar neuron, all the other neurons which are present inside the cerebral cortex, which are present in the other part of the body other than these things are multipolar neuron, has multiple poles, multiple dendrites, multiple axons that are present over there. But this is a separate type, a special type of neuron which is called as pseudo unipolar neuron, right, that is present in dorsal root ganglion. So this is a very important question that is continuously asked by institute in their practice test. Please make a note of this, don't ever forget this particular point. I have seen this question consistently appearing in my practice test, and once I messed up with this particular concept, that is dorsal is equal to posterior. I did not get that particular concept and I got one question wrong. So that is why I previously itself said that dorsal is equal to posterior, ventral is equal to anterior. So dorsal root ganglion is also called as posterior root ganglion. Please make a note of that. So the sensations are taken inside by the sensory root or the dorsal root, and that is going upwards till the brain. I mean the spinal cord itself is continuing till the brain, so through that it goes into the brain, right. So the brain will process information and that will send the signals, right, through the spinal cord, and what happens is that nerves within the spinal cord will be coming to the anterior surface. See, this is where the nerves will end, and from the anterior horn the nerve will arise, the spinal nerve will arise, and this will go into the effector muscles. Now once it reaches the effector muscle, then the muscle will contract and do whatever is necessary as per the situation, right. So the brain is sending the signals to the anterior horn. From the anterior horn, the nerve is arising, the spinal nerve is arising, and it is supplying the effector muscle, which will in turn contract. So this is the idea that you need to have. So the ventral root, ventral horn. So the ventral horn is responsible for motor function, right. Only when ventral horn is stimulated, there is an effect on effector muscles through the nerve which is arising out of the ventral horn, right. So the dorsal horn is sensory, ventral horn is motor, and the last thing is about the intermediate horn, this particular lateral horn, isn't it. So what is the importance of lateral horn? The first point I would like to make it much clear to you is that the lateral horn is not present everywhere throughout the spinal cord. No, it is not present everywhere. Where is it present then? It is present in the thorax, it is present in the lumbar area behind the abdomen, right. So those are the areas where this particular lateral horn is present. This lateral horn will give rise to nerves which are associated with the autonomic nervous system, right. Autonomic nervous system is divided into sympathetic nervous system, that is SNS, and parasympathetic nervous system, that is PSNS. So for all the nerves that are supplying, that has the function of sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, which are designated as sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, is actually arising from the lateral horn. And we said that sympathetic nervous system is thoracolumbar outflow, parasympathetic nervous system is the craniosacral outflow. So only in those areas the lateral horn itself will be present. But in all other areas, the sensory horn, that is dorsal horn, and the motor horn, that is ventral horn, will be present over there. So I hope this much of information is necessary so far as to crack any question that is coming in the Neet exam. So we will proceed to one such question that was asked in the Re-AIPMT 2015, and we will solve that to end this particular session. So let us look at this question now. The destruction of anterior horn cells. See, the anterior horn is this, isn't it? This is the anterior horn of the spinal cord, and the cells in that anterior horn is destroyed. So there is a lot of destruction that is taking place over there, right? Would result in loss of integrating impulses. Will that integration of impulse will be lost? See, integrating impulse and all those things that the complete idea of integration lies in the brain itself. So there is not so much related with the spinal cord as such. Integration of impulse is actually done with the help of brain. It will identify the impulse and it will give the necessary motor signal. Sensory impulses, will it result in loss of sensory impulse? No, this is actually associated with the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. This is the horn which is associated with sensory impulse. Voluntary motor impulse, yes, voluntary motor impulse is associated with this anterior horn. It is from this horn that the spinal nerve arises, and the spinal nerve is going to the muscle. What muscle? Effector muscle, right. So that is why the correct option for question that is why the correct option is option 3. Commissural impulse, this commissure, anterior commissure and posterior commissure are associated with the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is a band which connects the two cerebral hemispheres, and you see just below that particular structure you will see the commissures as such. So this is not so much at your level, but yes, the voluntary motor impulses are lost whenever there is a damage to the anterior horn cell. So that was the importance of discussing so much about the cross section of spinal cord and the function of each of these horns in the cross section of spinal cord. I hope you get the answer now very correctly. So the correct answer is option number 3. Now in the textbook, the only area where the spinal cord cross section is given is that area which talks about the reflex arc. Let us understand what is happening in reflex arc as such. So reflexive movements are just a sudden jerky movements which happen all of a sudden without any pre-planning, which is actually a protective reflex as such. So let us suppose that you are actually touching a hot object without knowing that it is a hot object. So immediately the impulse will go from your receptors through the dorsal root ganglion into the dorsal horn, because that is the sensory horn, and from there it goes into the brain, and that is true, but I will say that there is no much time that is given that will be available till your hand will get burned, because it goes up to the brain, it will integrate and it will understand what type of an impulse it is, and then they will give the motor impulse, it reaches the anterior horn, and finally it reaches the muscle. It takes a lot of time even in saying that. So just for the purpose of handling the situation, then and there is a connection between the dorsal horn and the ventral horn, that is through an interneuron. So this is how an interneuron will look like, and this is how it will pass the impulses to the ventral horn over here. And this interneuron, I will write it as IN here, interneuron will be supplying the impulse from the dorsal horn to the anterior horn, so that immediately the reflex can be generated when the horn will fire till the muscle, right. So this is a kind of an arc which is present over here. So they have a receptor, afferent nerve, there is an interneuron, then there is an efferent nerve. See, receptor, and you have an afferent, you have an efferent from the spinal cord which goes into the muscle, and this kind of a circle, this is called as the reflex arc. So in reflex arc, there is no need of going up to the brain and then the brain sending signals over here. That kind of a pathway is bypassed with the help of this particular interneuron, which connects the dorsal horn and the ventral horn for immediate result, right. But the final task is done by the brain itself. It will somehow reach the brain in any way, because it will directly go into the brain through this pathway, and then the brain will understand what type of an impulse is this. By the time the brain understands, you have moved your muscle from there. So that is a protective reflex. So with this we come to the end of this discussion. I hope you have liked the discussion, and you now know the importance of learning the concepts of the spinal cord as such. Even though it is not very clearly given in the textbook, please make a note of this and read this and revise this, so that any question in the future exam will be very easy for you. So if you like this video, like, share, subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon to receive instant notification whenever I put videos like this. Thank you.